So hello everyone. We're starting the new sugya of Dosh at the bottom of Ein Gimel on the base, and the agenda for the sugya is quite simple, which is to try and understand what the melacha of Dosh is and the related melachas of menafet and menafet. So this is the that's what the topic is about. Now I have to confess before I go further, I have struggled throughout the sugya to understand a little bit. One of the problems I've had in the sugya is understanding the process of menafet and menafet in particular. So that we'll just read the Gemara. The Gemara says Hadosh. By now a very familiar formulation. The Gemara starts off quoting the one word of melacha, of the 39 melachos listed in the Mishnah, and the melacha is Dosh, and then it quotes the related brisa, Tana, Hadosh, Hamenafet, V'Hamenafet, Kulon melacha achasein. Dosh, Menafet, and Menafet are all one melacha. Now we'll see later, other Rishonim we translate these terms differently, but for now we'll go with the view of Rashi, who says that Menafet is the equivalent processing with linen, with flax, and menafet is the parallel threshing process with cotton. That's how Rashi learns this brisa. So we have threshing with wheat, which is the classic melacha, and then we have two extensions, which is threshing with linen, flax, and threshing with cotton. Now, threshing with wheat, I know an awful lot about for a city boy. And it's a very familiar melacha, and I've Googled it extensively, and we sort of have a vague idea what threshing is. However, the equivalent with cotton and flax, I have struggled with. I turned to the ever faithful Wikipedia, but I couldn't quite picture what exactly happens there. And this is a problem, I must confess, because it is going to get us caught up in some of the definition of the melacha. So if anyone is able next time to prepare a very clear description of two things, I would be immensely grateful. The first one is the actual growth of... let me explain the problem. With wheat, I understand what happens. We know that we have a grain. The grain is the end product that we want. And the grain is surrounded in a casing, a shell, which needs to be broken. And in addition, it's held in a sort of the feathery envelope, which is the stalk and the ears, which also needs to be discarded. And we're going to see in the various stages of the melacha, through which basically you extract the grain and then separate off all the stuff that you don't want, and it goes away. With flax and cotton, there's these fibers, and there's also seeds. It's clear that the process is something to do with separating the seed from the fibers in order that you can use the fibers. But beyond that, I struggled greatly to work out what was going on. Are the fibers inside the casing of the seed, or by this stage are they broken out of the seed and you've just got the sort of husks of the seed mixed in with the fibers so that they need to be removed? I couldn't really get to the bottom of what the structure is. So if anyone is able to come up with a good diagram of what the seeds and the fibers, how they interact with each other, and what the process of separating them is, that would be very helpful. And I'm always nervous to say the following, but it appears to me that some of the machlokas between the Achronim around this issue is to do with confusion about what the process is. They seem to have had different views about what the mechanics of the process was also, and that seems to have created halachic confusion. I found two Achronim, both of whom said they did the responsible thing and consulted farmers, and yet seem to have got different information from the farmers they consulted about what the structure is. This is the Eglei Tal, who you already mentioned before, the author of the Avnei Nezer, Ram from Sochachov, very important Hasidic leader and massively important posek. And he says he consulted the Ovdei Adama, the farm hands, and they told him what it was like. And there's another very important work on Halacha Shabbos called the Yeshiva-style, who was a posek based in Yerushalayim in the 1920s. Very, very important work. And he says that he also asked the farm hands, and they seem to have got a completely different picture of what's going on. So I will share what I'm able to in this share, but I feel I'm learning the sugya with one hand tied behind my back. If one doesn't know the Metzias, it's very difficult. I assume everyone here did some Googling of what's going on to try and understand what's happening. If not, one should. Baruch Hashem, we live in an age where one has access to this sort of information.
Can we not ask farmhands?
I feel a bit let down by Google. Sorry, Max?
Can we not ask some farmhands?
Well, these Achronim said they asked farmhands. If you have access to a farmhand, you're welcome to do so.
But wouldn't part of the problem be like the Rebbe from
Sochachov, yes.
Sorry, he's not going to be living in a part of the world where they grow cotton, because cotton's in very hot, damp places like Egypt and Israel.
Yeah,
and I presume the Hasidic Rebbe.
Yeah, sorry. So he's talking about flax. In that case, sorry. Yeah, both are confusing to me. The Machlokas in Achronim is talking about flax. I also, to my embarrassment, didn't realize how ancient the cotton industry was. Europe already had it in the medieval era. It was certainly around in Bovel and Eretz Yisrael around the time. Flax, we know, is a very ancient industry because it comes in the Torah, right? Linen is one of the fabrics mentioned a lot in the Torah. Okay, let's leave aside the problems of realia, which are very important, and let's try and learn the sugya. But if anyone's able to produce a succinct summary for next year, I would be immensely grateful.
Can I just raise one other question, which is...
Yes, Edward, sorry.
Do we need to get confused by the fact that there is also in the list of the 39 Av melachot, menafets used separately to mean disentangling wool? Because
yes. Yeah. So, okay, so
menafets used differently, and we only know that menafets, we have obviously, Rashi says here that that menafets is pishtan, but we only know that because Rashi says it. It doesn't say it in the Gemara.
Yeah, okay, and that's the next point I'm going to address. You're absolutely right. Okay, so in Rashi's translation, we know what these three terms are. Dosh means with wheat, menafet means with pishton, with flax, with linen, and menafet means with wool, cotton wool. That's what cotton. That's what Rashi says. We will see, not maybe this year, but probably next year, an alternative translation of these terms. But for now, the first working through of the sugya, we're going to go with Rashi's translations, and we need to understand what the melacha is, what the relationship between menafet and menafet is to dosh, and finally, as Edward pointed out, the question that really Rashi already raises, which is surely menafet is not a dosh-linked melacha, but is found with wool. It's one of the 39 melachas listed in the wool cycle of production. So that's what we need to sort out. And really, I just mean on a pshat level. My aim in the sugya is to come out with understanding the pshat, what the melacha is, and what's going on over here. So Rashi says that, well, the first point to mention is that Rashi says that menafet is a tolda of dosh. Now, this is not obvious. We've seen this formulation throughout the Gemara. The whole of the Gemara, this Omud, has this very standard structure of listing the name in the Mishnah and then telling us A, B, C, kolom malacha achasein. For example, Hazoreya, Hazoma, Noteya, Vamavich, Vamachiv, kolom malacha achasein, etc. And we saw that was Chorish, and Chofer, and so on. Kolom malacha achasein. The Rambam consistently learns this to mean that they are all co-ovus. These brises are not listing toldus, but they are listing co-ovus. Rashi learns that menafet, is a tolda. That's the first thing to point out in Rashi. The second thing that Rashi says is, he says it's a tolda of dosh as opposed to the menafet, which is found in Semeh, because it's gedulei karka. The difference is that this is something that grows in the ground as opposed to wool, which isn't gedulei karka. Now, I would point out that Tosfos, and I think I put this on the source sheet, Tosfos says that the nifuts of Semeh is not listed. Tosfos asks a question. He says that nifuts of pishton, flax and linen production should have been an av because it's found in the Mishkan. answers Tosfos, it's so similar to dosh that it doesn't deserve it to be a malach in its own right. So, sorry, let me contextualize this. This is Tosfos and Ein Daled Amud Aleph. Tosfos, we're not going to go into that sugya now. We learned it actually when we looked at Borah. But basically, the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says there's some malachas which are so similar to the Av that the Mishnah doesn't even bother listing it as separate malachas. Sorry, let me step back and say that more accurately. The Gemara there questions what defines things as separate malachas. What makes there 39 malachas as opposed to 300 malachas? And it says whatever we find in the Mishkan, that's what achieves the status of an Av malacha. Meaning to say something which is as significant and as creative as an act found in the Mishkan is also an Av malacha, or tolda perhaps. However, it isn't given the name of one of the Avos malachas unless it was found in the Mishkan. Now, what that means to say is, and we discussed this at length when we first started Shabbos, there's a tension, in a sense, in the structure of the malachas of Shabbos. On the one hand, the malachas of Shabbos are intensely human-focused. They're about creative acts that we humans do. On the other hand, and that's a sort of bottom-up approach, that's starting from the foundation of looking at human needs and human functionality and upwards focused. But there's also a top-down approach, which is what happens in the Mishkan is diffused into what defines the malachas. Now, Tosfos picks up on this idea that anything that's found in the Mishkan achieves the Av status, and he lists a number of malachas which are found in the Mishkan, which are subsumed in another category as opposed to being their own Av malacha. And Tosfos says that's where, for all intents and purposes, they are absolutely identical to each other. Even if you find two things taking place in the Mishkan, if they are absolutely identical to each other, they don't get listed as separate avos. Says Tosfos, an example of this is the nifut of flax, which did take place in the Mishkan. After all, in the Mishkan they used linen fabrics, and nonetheless, says Tosfos, they're not listed in the Mishkan, in the Avos Malachos, because it's identical to dosh. There's no difference whatsoever between the two. Now, what this is telling us is that even though Rashi says that menafet semegefen is a tolda, menafets, that in other words, the process of nifut of cotton is a tolda, but menafets, which is flax, Tosfos tells us is exactly identical to dosh, to threshing. Now, again, I don't understand well enough the translation of these terms and what the processes are to really comment on that. But menafet seems to mean to smash or beat the flax, in which case this is akin to literally dosh with wheat, where you have the shell and the casing and you crack it open by stamping on it in order to bring out the grain. Similarly with flax, you crack the givol, the givolin, these shells. It would appear that the fibre is in some sort of shell. Again, as I said, I'm not quite sure of the reality of this, and we need to research this. And you crack it open, and therefore Tosfos says this is identical. In which case, quite possibly Rashi would agree with that menafet is a co-av with dosh, and it's menafet, which is with cotton, that Rashi is commenting is something completely different. Now, I'm not sure, and I saw variant translations, what menafet is. Does it also mean striking the cotton plant to remove the cotton seeds? Or is it some sort of combing process? But either way, it's not cracking open a shell, but removing the seeds, and therefore, says Rashi, more akin to the combing of wool to remove the dirt that's within the wool. Now, we'll get back to this later when we look at the issue again of Gedolei Karka and other such things, but basically, nifut of wool seems to be combing to remove the dirt. Nifut of cotton seems to be hitting or combing to remove the grains from it, and neither are identical to dosh, or menafet, which means smashing the shell in order to get to the inner contents. And if therefore Rashi agrees with Tosfos on this, it would turn out, and if Tosfos agrees with Rashi on this, it would turn out that this statement, Hadosh menafet kula malach achasein, isn't symmetrical. Dosh is the Av, menafet is identical to the Av as per Tosfos, and menafet is a tolda because it's very different to the Av, and arguably actually more similar to nifuts of Semeh, other than Rashi's distinction that one is Gedolei Karka and the other isn't Gedolei Karka.
I think the Ran and a couple of sources below still says the Kulhu dash Gamur, so he seems to really be the extreme of that Tosfot position. Everything is mamash dash. It's the same and just different substrate.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. The next sources we'll put there. The Rabbeinu Chanana learns a different shot in these terms, so I'm not going to go into that for now. But the Meyuchas L'Ran, the source ascribed incorrectly to the Ran through the generations, but an important Rishon nonetheless, learns that they are all of us. And the Rambam would learn that way, because the Rambam, as we said, takes this formulation of Kulon Melacha Achas, which is the classic structure of the whole sugya throughout the page, as all meaning they're all co-of-us.
I mean, I read the Ran, I think not even that they're co-avot, but they're exactly the same thing on the set, just different substrates, so they're different words for the same thing, essentially. So it's even more than co-avot, it is the same.
I don't know if that's correct or not. I see your point. I don't know if that's correct. We'd have to go through the language of the Ran in other co-melachos and see how he describes it. It's a fair point. It didn't occur to me. I now that you mention it, it probably should have been looked at. Like, one needs to check how he's using language.
When we're looking at combing out the wool of an animal, and we've got this idea that it's not gidule karka. I mean, the wool grows on the animal, and the animal's gidule karka because it's nourished off the ground. It grows on the ground. Is the scenario that there's muck caught up in the wool, like bits of mud and pebbles, and when the wool is on the animal, he's trying to comb out this muck, and the muck isn't gidule karka, but the wool is gidule karka, and therefore we're not separating two things which are both gidule karka.
Okay, so you've just summarised, Gary, absolutely superbly so, the next points that we need to talk about.
I'm sorry.
No. It's I'm delighted. It's absolutely correct. So the first point in Rashi is this issue of, is it an av and is it a told, and how do these three melachos relate to each other? The second point that absolutely needs to be picked up on is Rashi saying it's not gedulei karka, and this brings us back to a very familiar discussion which we had around Mefarik. Don't forget, we've already met Dosh once, because it happened to come up incidentally in Rav Ashi's state, in the statement of the Gemara, that if you throw this clod at the palm tree and knock off the dates, then you're doing two melachos. You're doing harvesting and you're doing Mefarik, which is perhaps the told of Dosh, and that's where we discussed Dosh already. And really, as you said, Gary, there's 4 points that we need to discuss here. First of all, what is Rashi saying about Dosh when he says that it's that when you are the reason why this is a tolda of Dosh is because it's gedulei karka, in contrast apparently to wool. So does that mean that Rashi holds that Dosh is only gedulei karka, which we discussed previously when Tosfos discussed about whether cholev could be gedulei karka? So that's question number one. Is Dosh one of the melachos that only needs to be gedulei karka? What's Rashi's view on that, at least? And remember our analogy in which we spoke about a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum is harvesting and ploughing and sowing, which are clearly melachos in the ground, the agricultural melachos. On the other end of the spectrum is cooking and baking, the 11th of the 11 melachos of producing bread, which clearly is a kitchen melacha and does not need gedulei karka. If you cook meat or something else, it's enough to be chayiv, even though it's not gedulei karka. And then we have somewhere in the middle, which point does it switch, and does gedulei karka cease to be a factor? We spoke about this in Ma'ameh, and we saw the various sources that said that Imor is only with gedulei karka. What's with Dosh, the next in the melacha? Is this Rashi telling us that Dosh has to be gedulei karka? So that's question number one. Questions number 2, 3, and 4 are, what isn't gedulei karka about the wool of the sheep? And here we have 3 candidates for what needs to be gedulei karka. Is it about the sheep? Is it about the wool? Or is it about the rubble in the wool that you're combing out? You don't do the combing, by the way, when it's on the animal. You do the combing once it's off the animal, but the wool has all bits in it because a sheep has been wandering around as animals do, and therefore it's not completely clean and it needs to be combed out. Which one of the 3 is the point that it's not gedulei karka? Is it the animal, in which case Rashi is learning that animals are not called gedulei karka, and we saw Tosfos when he spoke about milking, Gottlieb discussed this. Is it about the wool, because it's conceivable that the animal is gedulei karka, but the product of the animal is not gedulei karka? Or is it about the rubble which has been combed out, which is bits of thorns and stones and mud and things like that, which presumably isn't gedulei karka? So that also needs
also this
and next topic for discussion: what defines what's this point that Rashi is mentioning of gedulei karka?
There's also this distinction which you pointed to us in
the Tosfot in Baba Kama, which he seems to make a distinction between something which is Gedulei Karka Mamash, and then other things which may be Gedulei Karka, considered Gedulei Karka.
Yes, and that is also an excellent point, and we spoke about this when we looked at Cholev, because animals are somewhat Gedulei Karka. We saw with respect to Maaseh Sheni, the halacha is that you can buy, when you tithe your maaseh, you can redeem it onto a coin rather than taking the fruit up to your shrine. You can take the coin up to your shrine. You then use the coin to buy something which is the product of the ground, and animals would be included in this. But this doesn't necessarily mean that they are literally Gedolei Karka. And this is also part of the point that we spoke about in Tosfos with respect to Cholev. So this is some of the confusion in Rashi. Now, sorry, Gary.
On that Tosfot that you've already covered, just from a translation perspective, what does it mean, Shezebitwa V'zebefishtam? Because I'd assume, they may be wrong, it's is any produce that grows in a field. And that flax would grow in a field.
Tavor is used in at least in Mishnaic Hebrew to refer particularly to grain produce.
Grain produce.
To the grains as opposed to general produce. I don't know. I'm not enough of a grammarian to know if this is already in biblical Hebrew, this distinction or not.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's the next topic of discussion. Now, initially, when I saw Rashi, I thought this Rashi was evidence that Dosh has to be with Gedolei Karka. But upon rereading Rashi, I think this is a mistake. And I think that all Rashi is saying is that the reason why Nifut isn't a tolda of Nifut of Temer is because Nifut is with Gedolei Karka, things that grow in the ground, and therefore more similar to Dosh than wool production, which isn't Gedolei Karka. I don't know if there's evidence in Rashi that if you do something literally analogous to Dosh, in something which isn't Gedolei Karka, that Rashi would say that it's not that it's not Gedolei Karka. So I don't think that's a deal. Sorry.
Is it possible to say in relation to Rashi that if you were taking these seeds out of the cotton in a way which was not how professionals would do it, then you would not be saying in such a case that it's going to be a tolda of dash, because he's got kederech ha'umanim. That's really what I was.
Yeah, I think that's another diuk in Rashi, but I think that's more to do with the general rule that melachos have to be done kederech.
Okay.
As opposed to particularly in this melacha. I don't think that's to do with this point, but again, the question we've got over here, I don't know what you thought. The Rashi here that says that Semer Geffen Gedolei Karkahu Lahachi Kori Nifet Delay told of the Dosh. Originally, I thought Rashi saying it's because it's Gedolei Karka that it can be considered a told of Dosh, implying if it's not Gedolei Karka, it couldn't be a told of Dosh. Upon rereading of Rashi, maybe Rashi learns that Dosh can be even when it's not Gedolei Karka, and he's simply making the point that what defines this as Dosh as opposed to a Semer linked Malacha is because it's more similar to Dosh because it's in Gedolei Karka as opposed to with Semer, but not that something can't be Dosh if it's not Gedolei Karka. That's what it seems to me. There's not necessarily a diuk in the Rashi. I don't know what does everyone think. Do you think that's a reasonable distinction?
I mean, we probably got it wrong, but we were only thinking, we thought manafet could mean two different things in two different contexts. So we thought the manafet, it's a different phrase, because the of malacha of the tzemah says manaf so. It doesn't say manafet, it's manaf so. In other words, manafet et tzemah. So I was thinking that was a combing process, whilst the manafet here, me and Josh thought, was actually more of a separation process. And it meant different things in different contexts. And it's just a completely different malacha.
I don't know is the answer. Rashi says you do it with this kashes. I'm not sure if that means a beating implement or a combing implement. But either way, Rashi's bothered. Why is it not a tolda of manafet semer? Which seems to imply that it is quite similar to the nifut process of semer. other than it's not Gedolei Karka, which initially I read to mean that Dosh is only Gedolei Karka, but I'm not sure that's correct anymore. If Rashi wanted to say that Dosh is only Gedolei Karka, it seems to me he would have said that. And he doesn't say that. He says a very long-winded exposition about why is it more similar to, why is it told of Dosh, not told of Nifutz. And a factor in that, the reason for that is because it's Gedolei Karka. He doesn't just say what you're talking about, Dosh is Gedolei, anything which is Gedolei Karka is Dosh. So I don't think that Rashi is necessarily declaring over here that Dosh only applies to things which grow in the ground. So anyway, that's what it appeared to me in the reading of the Gemara. Moving on. Moving on to Paul's second point, if you learn that an animal is called Gedolei Karka, and who, for example, learned that? Well, one figure who learned this was the Maggid Mishnah that we saw in the last sukkim, in Perek Ches Halacha Zayin, who explained this in the view of the Rambam, who learns that Dosh is only... We had the following question, just to remind ourselves. Cholev is a melacha, a tolda of Dosh, and Dosh is only with Gedolei Karka. So we saw two answers to that question. The first answer to the question was from the son of the Rambam, Rabbi Zobin Rambam, who said, I don't understand the question at all. You're confusing toldas and others. These are two completely separate melachos. Just because Dosh is with Gedolei Karka doesn't mean that Cholev is with Gedolei Karka. These are separate things. That was one answer to the question. The Maggid Mishnah gave a different answer to the question. He said, what do you mean? Animals are called Gedolei Karka. So if animals are called Gedolei Karka, let's turn Rashi's question on its head. Rashi is asking, what defines menafet as a tolda which melacha? Why can't we ask the question in reverse, which is, isn't every nifut semeh, every time you comb wool, why shouldn't this be included in Dosh? Why is it a separate melacha at all? If nifut is so similar to nifuts that the only distinction Rashi can come up with is that nifuts is with things that grow in the ground, as opposed to nifuts is things that grow in the ground, as opposed to with wool, it doesn't grow in the ground, then if the Rambam, the Maggid Mishnah at least, is of the view that the Rambam learns that an animal is called Gedolei Karka, why should every combing of wool not be counted as Dosh? Now, we need to go into this in more detail, and we will do so next week in Yad Hashem. But Dosh, there are later melachos which are boreh, which are sorting things out. That's not the melach of Dosh. Dosh is breaking things apart. Now, it would appear that the rubble in wool is closely enough entwined that it could qualify as Dosh. That's what Rashi is telling us. So if we go with Rashi's assumptions that the breaking apart of the wool is enough to count it as Dosh, and we combine that with the view of the Rambam, which is arguably that animals are called Gedolei Karka, then Paul's point becomes a significant question over here, which is why isn't every combing of the wool a melacha of Dosh? And the answer to the question is that evidently we're going to have to unpick some of these assumptions. Rashi thinks that this is identical, but in the Rambam we'll argue not like that. But this is the next thing we'll have to look at. And I would reference to you, I think I printed it on the source sheets, the Rambam in Perek Tes, yes I did, Halacha Yud Beis, near the end, in which the Rambam puts Nifut Semeh and Nifut of Pishton together. In other words, the Rambam doesn't separate it off like our Brisa does, in which the Brisa links Dosh, Menafet, and Menafet as Kulon, Malach Achas. He lists Nifut as a tolda of wool processing rather than as a tolda of Dosh, and we're going to have to address that. So we'll stop there for today, and in Mitzvah Hashem try and carry on next week and get greater clarity in what the definitions of all the melachos are.